In this video, I'm going to be taking the mystery out of what it takes to create a project on a CNC router. I'm going to be going through some of the software packages and the setup on the actual machine itself. To demonstrate this, I'm going to be creating 3 different projects, showing you step by step from start to finish how to make your own projects. The machine that I'll be using is going to be the Artisan 01 by WIZMAKER, and personally, I think it's one of the best entry-level CNC routers on today's market, packed full of features that give us a lot of performance without spending a whole lot of money. Now with that, let's get started. We're going to think of this as kind of a 3-step process where each step could potentially use a different software package. Starting out with step number 1, that software program is going to be where we generate our graphic, whether we create our graphic within that program or simply import some clip art. This typically is going to be kind of the fun part and most creative part of the project. Step number 2, or the second software program, is going to take that graphic file that we created, and this new software, we're going to tell it what router bit we're using in the machine, how fast we want the machine to run, and how deep we're going to be milling into our material. This is all going to create a file called G-code. Step number 3, which is of course going to be potentially a different software package. This third step is simply going to take that G-code and send it out to the CNC router. That all sounds kind of straightforward, but let's put it into action by creating our first project. And for this, I'm actually going to cheat a little bit and skip steps 1 and 2, and that's because on the USB drive that comes with the Artisan 01 is a G-code file that already has, of course, step number 1, the graphic, and step number 2, the generated G-code. I'm going to be using a program called Candle, and luckily for us, that too is included on the USB drive. Now, all of these packages are going to cost money, so just keep that in mind when you're budgeting for your CNC router machine. Now with that, we are ready to jump into the computer and check out this first project. And we're going to start out by homing the machine. Before I load the G-code file into Candle, there's a couple things I need to know, like what kind of router bit I'm supposed to be using with that G-code file, along with the size of the graphic, so I grabbed the correct size material for this first project. And luckily for us, there's a text file that's on the USB drive that comes with the Artisan 01 that tells me all of this information. I have the router bit installed on the 300-watt spindle, and my work material is securely clamped down. We'll take a look at the graphic, and between the graphic that we see on the screen and that text file, it is telling us that the center point that we should be aligning the machine up to the work material is going to be the center of the graphic. So that's exactly what I'm going to do now, is move the machine over to the center of the material and then re-zero the X and Y axes. That is going to tell the machine that it is going to be in the center of the graphic. To jog the machine over, I'll use the controls over on the right-hand side of the machine and just move the machine over until it's in the correct spot. Once I'm happy with the position, I can go over here and we're going to zero the X and Y. We're going to see that on the work here column, it is going to zero that out. That looks good. And now the next thing I'm going to do is index the Z-axis or the tooling down so it just touches the very surface of the workpiece. I'll use a piece of paper as kind of a feeler gauge, and I'll very carefully index this down until I feel just a little bit of friction. That looks good. And now I can hit this button here to zero the Z-axis, and we'll see that that will go to 0. That looks good. I'm going to back the Z-axis up just a little bit so it has some clearance. This all looks good, and from here, all I need to do is turn the spindle on and hit the send button. Less than 10 minutes later and the project is all complete and turned out perfectly. Project number 1 turned out absolutely perfect. I think the only thing I would do different would be to paint the surface before I router into it. That way the graphic shows up a lot better. And you know what? On project number 2, that's exactly what I did. I gave it a nice black coat of paint, so the graphic is going to show up so much better. The first thing I'm going to do in project number 2 is actually grab my material and a ruler, and I need to measure the dimensions of my material blank. I have that written down, and now we can hop into easel and start project number 2. Here we are in easel, and the first thing that we see across the top of the screen is something that looks like an internet web browser bar, and well, that's because it is. Easel is going to be web-based, meaning I do have to be able to connect to the internet to use it. Now, if you remember, the first thing I did to start this project is I measured my material, and right here is where I would enter that in. And we're also going to see that I have the 0 or the start point of the project in the front left-hand corner indicated by this red dot. When I go to zero the machine out against the wood material, that is the point where I'm going to zero the machine. The graphic I'm going to use for this project is actually built into easel software. Down at the bottom here is monogram. I'm going to click on that, and now I can start to create the graphic. I think for this I'm going to put the name of the machine, which is the Artisan. I like the way that looks, and I can pull down and use different font styles if I like. That's the one that was defaulted when I started. That one looks pretty good. And you can go through and check all of these out. For now, I think I'm going to leave this as kind of like big and blocky. I like the way that looks. And I can pick different styles. I can do a circle, make it look royal. That looks really cool. And actually, I think I might pick this one. I'm going to keep that one. I'm going to tell it to generate that. And just like that, using easel, I've already created a project graphic that looks pretty cool, and I'm going to just size this all down just a little bit so it fits inside of the work material that I have. The next thing I'm going to do is pick the bit or the router bit that I'll have on the machine. Now, in selecting a router bit, if I do something that is really small, like a 1/16 of an inch, we're going to see down here that it's going to estimate it's going to take 2 to 3 hours to make this project. If I select a larger bit that is twice as big, we're going to see that the time basically cuts in half down to 1 to 2 hours. And if I pick even a bigger bit yet, this 1/4 inch one, we're going to see that most of our design disappears. And that's because the router bit that we use has to be smaller than the smallest detail of our graphic. If our router bit is bigger than the graphic, it simply won't bother trying to mill it. I can click on my graphic and we bring up this menu bar here. It gives me some basic information about the size of the actual graphic. I can go over here to the cut. This is going to be how deep we're going to be doing the milling. The last thing that I need to do is go over to cut settings, and I always like to go to manual, and I'm going to manually pick my speeds, and I think I'm going to start out with something at 15 inches per minute. For the G code, all I need to do is go download G code, and from here I can load the material into the machine, put the appropriate bit in the router, and start up candle. I have my 1/8 inch router bit attached, and for the material, I'm not going to be using the clamps included with the machine. Instead, to attach the material down to the spoiler board, I'm going to be using some blue painter's tape and some super glue. Let's check it out. The painter's tape and super glue is one of my most favorite methods for attaching material down to the spoiler board, especially when the graphic goes up near the edge of my material. This is pretty straightforward. I'm just going to put some painter's tape down on the spoiler board. And one last piece on the spoiler board. I'll do the same to the back side of my work material. On the work material, I only need 3 strips of tape. And now it's time for some super glue. I'll put 3 dots in each corner. And then a couple in the other spots. I'll get this flipped over. And once it's mashed down, I'm going to move it around a little bit. Make sure that it's all squared up. And get some weight on top, and I'll give that about a minute or 2 for it to set. And I'm ready to switch over to candle, and the first thing I'm going to do is home the machine just like we did on project number 1. Here's our file, and you know the next step, it's time to jog to the starting point that we had set within easel in this front left corner. This looks good for the X and Y axes, so I'll come up here to 0x and Y, and there it did exactly that. It zeroed that out. Now I'm going to move the bit over the material some more, and now I'm going to set the Z axes. Once again, just like on the first project, I'm going to take a Post-it note and just use that as a feeler gauge. That's good, and I can zero the Z-axis, confirming it right there. That looks good, and the last thing I always like to do is just move that Z-axis up just a little bit. And from here, I'm ready to, as you guessed it, start the spindle and hit the send button. "49 minutes later and the project is all complete. I got a big dusty mess here. Let's get that cleaned up. Medium density fiber board, when I have small detail, it has a tendency of chipping out. So not really a problem with the machine. It's more of my material selection and how deep I was cutting this out. But I think overall it still looks pretty neat, and I still have a little bit of cleanup to do, but before I do that, I need to get this super glued project off the spoiler board. For that, I just grab a rigid putty knife. I'm just gonna wedge that in one corner and just start wiggling it back and forth. And just like that, it starts to peel up and it pops right off. I find taking a nice flat file gently across the top knocks off any little pieces that were sticking up. I think for a beginner like me, this project turned out really nice. Certainly I would like to see no chip out on both of the A's, but overall, this looks really good. If I wanted to fix this where I didn't have any chip out, I would select an actual wooden board and not this MDF material that's literally sawdust glued together. But I like using this material because I can find it anywhere. It's easy to work with and it's really inexpensive. So when I make mistakes like on this project, well, it didn't really cost me too much and I think it still looks pretty nice. The more projects that I create on my CNC router, the more experience I gain and the more things I learn, and this really motivates me to come back out to the studio and create yet more projects. As we saw in project number 2, it created a lot of dust, but luckily for us, the makers of the Artisan 01, WIZMAKER, they do make an accessory, a dust collector that clamps onto the spindle motor, and it's going to remove most of the dust off of the project, making cleanup afterwards a real breeze. Now we're on to the third and final project. For that, I have yet another painted board. This one's really big. This project we're going to create within Millmage. Once again, that's from the makers of Lightburn software. We're going to do all 3 steps within Millmage. Let's hop into the computer and check out the graphic for this third project. We are going to start out with entering in the dimensions of our work material just as we did before. I'm going to switch this over to inches. Down here, it is going to ask us what the origin or the start point is going to be for this project material. Once again, we're going to pick the front left corner. That is going to place the machine in this front left-hand corner when we set the machine 0. Let's click on this project that I already have created, but I'm going to show you the steps on how I got there. So here's the graphic that I've got. It is the state of Wisconsin where the laser channel is filmed. So I went out on the internet to pixabay.com and I just simply typed in the state and found something that was an outline, and this is what it came back with. This is an SVG file. I highly recommend when you're working with a CNC router that all of your image files, your clip art that you import preferably is an SVG file. It's just simply easier to work with. I'll select my state of Wisconsin. I'm just going to make this bigger so it kind of fills in some of the space and kind of move it up here. And then to add a personal touch to it, I wrote the word home with one of the fonts that I've got loaded on my computer, and I can in fact make this a little bit bigger. That looks good. If you want to see what that looks like, it's simply grabbing the text tool here, going off to the side and typing in home. And then going back to the cursor, and while that is still selected, I can come up here to the font and go through whatever fonts I have loaded in on my computer. But I am going to stick with the original one that I had made right here. I've got some extra room down on the bottom. For that, I'm going to grab the text tool again, and I'm going to type in the laser channel. And that text looks a little too boring for me, so I am going to grab something else. Next, I need to pick the router bits I'm going to use to create this project. For the lettering, I'm going to select all of that, and I want to use the same router bit for that. And I'm going to go over to Operations, and we need to pick a new operation, and we're going to do a pocket mill. On this screen here, I can pick my tool, I can pick the depth, and I can pick what kind of offsets and the speeds. That all looks good, and I'll click OK. Now, for the outline for the state of Wisconsin, I'm going to start a new operation for that. And for that, I just want to do a profile, and this is simply going to draw a toolpath line around the entire state. And for that, once again, I'm going to pick the same tool again. I'll click OK. And this time we're going to go down 1/16 of an inch. And it wants to know what side of the line we're going to be making the tool path. That can go on the line, inside the line, or outside, and I'm going to go directly on the line itself. That looks good. And from here, I can click on the preview button. I always call it the TV button up at the top. And I can zoom in, and this is going to show us what it looks like on a board. And here's the other concept. This is actually going to be all the tool paths that it creates. The quick recap on project number 3. We've completed step number 1 where we created our graphic, and we just completed step number 2 where we told the software what router bit we're going to be using and how deep we're going to be cutting. And now we're ready to move on to step number 3 where we actually send our project file out to the machine. For this, I'm going to navigate over to the Move tab, and I'm going to start out just like before within Candle. I'm going to home the machine. And you probably guessed the next 2 things I need to do. Install the router bit on the spindle, and then I also need to attach my work material down to the spoiler board. Now I just need to set the workpiece 0, which is indicated by this little green square. That looks good, and now I can 0 the x-axis, 0 the y-axis, and I'll grab that post-it note just like I did before, and I'm going to lower the router bit until it is just touching the paper. That looks good, and now I can 0 the z-axis, and just as before, I'm going to bump that up just a little bit. And from here, I can start the project. The third project is all complete and the layout matches perfectly what we had in the software. I'm going to call this a success. We will see once again that a lot of the islands in the letters, those did chip out. I thought if I went a little bit shallower, it would be okay, but apparently I'm still running too deep in this really soft, non-structured MDF material. In comparison, when I use a real piece of wood like this red oak, I can get a phenomenal amount of detail, and we'll see that there's absolutely no chip out on any of the lettering. All of the software that I used in today's video is super powerful. I shared just enough of the features to get you going on your very own projects, but know that there's a lot more features and things that you can do within each of the softwares that we saw in today's video, which, by the way, I'll have links to all of those down in the video description. Thanks for joining me in this video. I had an absolute blast sharing with you how to create projects on a CNC router. Don't forget to show this video some love by giving it a like or subscribing to the channel. Not only does it help the laser channel grow, it's an awesome way to connect video content like this with other great viewers just like you. And until we meet again in the next video, I'm Greg from the Laser Channel, where we learn, create, and share.